I'm going to have to change them. Everyone's moving. You guys are moving around. Oh, is that So is this a new start? Just starting in the fall? What was the price of housing grant or Good afternoon. My name is Lucille Ponte. I'm from Florida Coastal School of Law, along with my co-presenters, Scott Burnham, who is now at Gonzaga School of Law, and we're moving things around here a little bit, and Jennifer Martin, who's at St. Thomas University School of Law. Joe Harbaugh, who wanted to be with us, ended up having they changed the time for the session, so we had a conflict, so we couldn't do it. But he sends his regards. He's on the Distance Ed Committee with me for SEALS, the Southeast Academy of Law Schools. And we wanted to talk a bit today about, if you remember that movie, The Full Monty. Do you remember that movie, The Full Monty? It was about some unemployed workers who found a way to get money, which was they promised all their neighbors that they'd do a full striptease in a local bar, and everyone had to pay a price to see it, so that was the way they were going to fund it. And so we sort of use this as kind of, there will be no stripping here, so if that's what you were hoping for, you can forget about it, but that's probably a good thing. But the idea was the fact that we've heard so much in the last couple of days about the fantastic technology that's out there, and the academic technology folks, and the IT folks, and the library folks that are so way ahead of faculty in a zillion ways with all the technology. And we've heard a lot today about, and yesterday as well, about what the student needs are and what students want. But this is kind of sort of look at it from the faculty perspective. And you might say the biggest roadblock in the group of three, there's probably the faculty aspect of it. And we're going to look at it from a couple of perspectives. I'm going to look at it sort of in a general way about how you can get faculty who are currently reluctant to use distance education, and some techniques that you might try to get to lure them in slowly, so that then ultimately they might say, hey, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, or this is something that I'm going to enjoy doing. Then Scott's going to talk a bit about how he's learned things from his distance ed courses that he's taught, that he's brought into his face-to-face classrooms. And then we're going to have Jennifer talk a bit about if you're in an environment where you don't have all the bells and whistles and you don't have all the technology, how you can make use of distance ed techniques kind of on a budget. So it's just going to give us sort of the budgetary version of this, but it's a good thing to know because we're all in different schools and we all have different budgetary and technical capabilities. But one thing to sort of keep in mind, and I think this goes back to, there we go. I think we're seeing sort of a generation gap in the idea of consuming content and delivering content. And I think that's where maybe some of the tension is with the faculty members you might be trying to get to use distance ed techniques. Most of our students, Mark Prensky sort of coined this term, are digital natives. They grew up with digital technology. They haven't seen a rotary phone or a Selectric typewriter or any of the other things that I might have grown up with. Right? So they're very used to having digital technology. They're very comfortable with digital tools. You know, me, I like to have a manual and read it all, and they just sort of play with it. You know, and in 5 seconds they've learned more than I ever could have from reading the manual. But keep that in mind, that's our students. And also, they're much more used to tailoring content and customizing it in a way for themselves to view it, in a way that I wasn't. I didn't have opportunities to tailor any of my legal resources, which were all books when I went to law school. When I went to law school, we didn't even have word processors yet. So I remember typing papers on an orange Olivetti typewriter and, making a mistake, you had to start all over again, that kind of thing. So they're very used to being interactive and customizing. A lot of educators, a lot of the faculty that you're dealing with, myself included, grew up in a pre-digital society. So it's not something that's kind of inherent or second nature to us. We're adapting to these digital tools, but at different or varying capabilities. Some people, I have colleagues who say to me, oh, I'm too old to learn that stuff. Or, oh, you're a techie, I don't know anything about tech stuff. And I want to say to them, I'm not a techie. I mean, I was in a pre-digital era too. I had to kind of learn this stuff. So you're going to find people who are going to resist at different levels because of their own comfort level about learning something new and about making a mistake. Faculty members never make a mistake, so this is really a challenge for some people, okay? And then also this idea that we're used to consuming content in a passive way. When I did go to school, I read a book that was given to me. I didn't have a chance to go online and look at different websites and download materials or customize materials. Or a great CALI session right before this about CALI authoring. And there's so many things you can do now that we couldn't do originally. So I think some of the tension comes from the fact that the digital immigrants are learning at different levels than, say, the digital natives. The ABA has put out its standard on distance education, and they basically say if you're separated in time and place between the instructor and the student, that's viewed as distance ed, but it's only a distance ed course if more than a third of the course instruction is done in this sort of separate model. You're not in the same place at the same time. And they generally limit students to about 12 credits. So even the ABA is kind of dipping their toe in the pond and just to see, okay, what can we do? And you can deliver things either synchronously or asynchronously. So either way is fine. But I think a lot of faculty, when you say to them, we want you to use distance ed, they completely assume that it's a distance ed course and that they're going to be separated completely from their students, and they're not comfortable with that. Maybe they like the in-class interaction, or maybe they like the personality-wise, they like to spend more time to get to know their students. So some of it is to recognize, help them to recognize, I think the first step, is help them to recognize it's not an all or nothing thing. It's either distance ed or it's not. So you've got to say to them, you can take and use what's called distance ed techniques. You can still have a face-to-face class, you can still see your class every day, but you can incorporate some of these techniques to try to reach out to the digital natives and also to expand your own learning as a digital immigrant. When you're talking about asynchronous, I think you need to break it down for people. Because I think a lot of faculty say, asynchronous, synchronous, what does this all mean? It's all so hard. And you find it as technology people, well, duh, you should know this, right? But most faculty are going to say, I don't know what that means. And they're not going to ask you, so they're just going to say, I don't want to learn this, it's too hard. So asynchronous, this idea, you have to let them know, well, this is where you might post something up and the student's looking at it at a different time than you are. So you're not doing it at the same time. So if you can spell that out. So things like course homepages. A lot of faculty might be willing to do that. I know at our school they're going to have us all do a sort of a shell course homepage. And we're doing it, I think, Susan Ponce of Stringer's here, she's from academic technology at our school. They're trying to sneak this in as disaster recovery relief because we're in Florida and hurricanes happen. So hey, you never know, there could be a hurricane, can't get to the school, so everybody put up a shell. So whatever we have to sell it, find a way, right? So we're selling it with the hurricane approach. Maybe you have locusts or something where you figure it out, okay? Audio and video podcasts, right? That's another sort of way where you're putting something out there, the student's listening to it at a different time. And so I put a little podcast in here because you can tell, I think you should try to get the faculty to see there's some fun things you can do. So I did this in my home office with a webcam and a Guitar Hero mic. Since I never get it otherwise, because the rest of the family thinks I sing badly, which I think is right. But just see if I can just play it. And hopefully it'll work. We had some problems with it earlier, so we'll see.
Consider some of the ways that you might incorporate distance learning techniques into your already existing face-to-face classes. One way is through an audio or audio-video podcast. In the audio-video podcast, you can cover key concepts that were discussed during the week or pose a question they want the students to respond to in discussion board postings. You might also use it as an opportunity to make students aware of some current legal issue of interest to the class. Regardless of how to use audio and video podcasts instead of people in 5 to 10 minutes for maximum attention. In addition, most law schools and universities have taping systems, and webcams are relatively inexpensive in order to help you improve and include distance learning techniques into your face-to-face course.
So you just get a faculty member to do that once and say, wow, that's cool, I'm totally a tech person now. But you guys would see this as nothing, but for a faculty member, this is like a big leap forward. So one thing to do is perhaps, have them work with something very simple like this, where they say, hey, I could do this, I'm capable of this, right? Discussion board postings, and I think we're going to see a little more about wikis and the like from Jennifer, so I'll hold off on that. That's another thing where you can use that as asynchronous or wikis and blogs, right? So I'll leave that to Jennifer, she's going to talk a bit about that next. Synchronous is when you're doing it at the same time, and that can be a little more challenging, so that's more advanced distance ed. But if you want to start somebody, get them started with the asynchronous. Things like the chat and breakout rooms that you might have, like for example, either you could use an instant message for a chat, or I use Illuminate Live, and you can chat in there as well as have your class running at the same time, but you can also have separate breakout rooms for the students to work in, where you can go into those rooms. Web conferencing, learning management systems, where you've got sort of the soup to nuts of quizzes are in there, and emails are in there, and grading is in there. And then, if you're really going to go way out there, 3D virtual classrooms, so you go to a place like, an example is secondary, I don't know how often it's used, but you have that as options. This is sort of the higher level of use of distance ed techniques. But you might want to break it out for people like that so they know, okay, this is what an asynchronous, this is what synchronous means. And then also kind of give them a little chart, okay, this is a little less interactive with your students, and these are the things that are perhaps more interactive with your students. So if you're just posting the course homepage, that's some level of interaction, because the students, you're posting it, the students go and get it. But if you're going to get into a chat room and it's happening at the same time, that's even more interactive. So people can see there's kind of a continuum here of activity that they could work from. I think one of the biggest problems, and I spoke with Ellen Koger at Stetson, who did quite a bit of this, and she's sort of a pioneer in some ways from a faculty perspective, and she talked about the fact that everywhere that she spoke, she always found that there was maybe 5 or 10 faculty that were really into distance education, but everybody else thought that's for them. That's for the distance ed true believers who think it's better than the classroom, or for the geeks, or for the techies, and not for me. So I'll have those 5 or 10 people, they do the distance ed, and I won't have to do it, and then the dean will be satisfied because the tools will get used, and that'll be it. I think part of it is sort of moving beyond the group, because even the group of faculty here, when they asked how many people were in faculty the other day, it was a small number. We've got to sort of move more faculty into it and get it away from being this sort of small little pocket of people who have an interest in it. And I think that's really where you're going to see all your hard work pay off if you're in academic technology or in IT, where you sort of move beyond just a few people doing little tiny things. One thing is to try to incentivize faculty, and we talked a little bit about this in one of the earlier sessions yesterday. Maybe it's going to be a course release, right? We'll give you a course release if you go and put your class online, or you try to learn some of these distance ed techniques. Annual evaluation points. I know our school this year has included in there some additional points if you have course homepages, if you use Illuminate Live, if you make an effort to use podcasts. So they're trying to move people that way, incentivize them through evaluation points. It could be a tech or a financial bonus. I know when I was at UCF, it was actually a semester-long course, and if you completed the course, you got a laptop to bring home, because they only had desktops there on the campus. So that was one way. People who wanted to be able to have the laptop said, well, all right, maybe I'll go through this whole course, and then that got them interested in distance ed. They taught a course using their laptop. Or some folks had said that they used financial bonuses to try to get people to do it, and that was one way to try to incentivize. The other is to perhaps offer a variety, many of you probably do this already, training options, because people have different learning styles and also confidence levels. People may have different levels of confidence about their ability to do it. As I said, a lot of faculty don't want to look dumb, so they might not be willing to go to a workshop where they're going to raise their hand and everyone's going to laugh because they asked a really dumb question. So maybe an online tutorial where they can make their mistakes in privacy, that kind of thing. I know at the SEALS conference in August, Joe and a bunch of us are on the committee are going to do a tech expo where people can go and look at what other people have done and touch it and play around with it on their own in the actual conference so that they get familiarity with it. So that might be a way to do this at your school. Have a tech expo where people get to play around with it a little bit, and maybe they do their little 10-second, hi, I'm Professor so-and-so. They think, wow, this is cool, maybe I'll do this in the future. There are people who are always going to want to have paper, so have those paper manuals available. Focused faculty workshops, don't try to teach them every distance ed technique. Take one simple one and have a workshop on it and then build on that over time. One-on-one tutoring if that's necessary. You know, and I know for a lot of you that's hard to do because that's a lot of use of human resources, but it is an option for somebody. Or, as I said, at UCF they have an entire center dedicated to this. I had a semester-long course. We went every Friday for like 4 hours. It was about 20 or 30 faculty members. I did this constantly. Also providing adequate support resources, because if you don't have them and somebody runs into a problem, if they have one bad experience, it's going to be really hard to get them to do it again. So having the resources there, so if they have that bad experience, you catch them before they fall to the ground and say, this stuff doesn't work at all, then that's probably a really good thing to do. Some things you might want to suggest to your faculty, and you don't even have to call it distance ed, you could call it interactivity, you could call it, you know, any name you want to give it. One is to say to the faculty member, just do one introductory podcast. You don't have to podcast the whole semester. Just one, where you introduce yourself to the class, talk a little bit about the course, maybe you show the textbook, 1 minute long. What's 1 minute out of your life, right? So maybe do an introductory podcast. And then maybe they might say the students liked it. I knew I had a class that was totally asynchronous, and they'd like to know who I was, that person behind the screen. And it was nice, they said they actually like to see the welcome podcast so they know who you were. So that was helpful, connecting with the students that way. Developing a course homepage, you know, just get it up there and just put your syllabus up, see how that goes. And then the students will want more material, and of course they'll end up posting even more, and that's a good thing. Have discussion postings just once in the semester. Use the discussion board feature, whether it's on Twin or you're going to use Lexis, Blackboard, or whatever it is, just do it once. Have a topic that you couldn't cover completely in class, and every faculty member say, oh, I can't cover everything. Find that one thing, and have a discussion board posting about it. And then the students can interact, and the faculty member can take a look at it later. This is always, I hope, the one that will be the big seller. Virtual office hours. You know, during the semester, 1 hour out of your office hours, either out of the semester or out of the week. Do them virtually. That means you could do it from home, Professor. Okay? So that might grab them, right? Or during exam periods, when people generally aren't around, anyways, even the students aren't around, while they're studying at home or they're in the library. So use that as a time to do some review or answer some questions. That's a one-shot deal. So if it doesn't go well, that's all right. Try it again another time. Or some kind of online review session. So I think if you start your faculty off slow, speak slowly for us, because we're digital immigrants and we don't know the language like you do. Start us really slow and maybe challenge people to do one small thing. And I think you might find that over time that's going to reap larger benefits. Right? So I'll move on to Jennifer, who's going to talk about how to do this in an environment where you don't have.
Actually,
Scott's going to talk a little bit about what he did and how he learned from his online course and how he brought that into his regular classes, face-to-face sessions.
This is pretty low tech. I have 5 talking points, and I'm going to talk about that. And, a number of years ago, I was asked to teach a course at Concord Law School, and of course that's an online course because Concord only exists online. And so, meanwhile, I've been a full-time faculty member first at Montana, coming up at Gonzaga. So I've been thinking about, well, what did I learn from Concord that I can use in my regular teaching? And I must say I've been very impressed with Concord and the way they do things, and it has opened my eyes to a number of possibilities. Well, number one, it really is what Lucille was talking about, that of course, when you're teaching online, you're not doing a stand-up lecture, so you're forced to think of other ways to teach the course. That my Concord class has 15 modules spread over a normal semester, and during that time, I only have 5 synchronous lectures. only 5 synchronous lectures. So I have to fill the other time with other sorts of things. So this forces you to think about, well, of course, I'm going to have the students read things, but I'm also going to have them do problems and exercises and CALI lessons. And also have them watch a video or listen to a podcast, and many of the things that we've talked about you have to do when you teach online. So that forces you to think, well, I can now use some of those things in my regular stand-up class. And then secondly, and I think this is the most important one, it's simply scandalous in legal education that we have generally one exam at the end of the semester. It's an outrage. And it's totally unjustifiable pedagogically. The only justification for it is that faculty think that other things are more important than student teaching and learning, so they don't spend as much time on that. But at Concord, there is frequent evaluation. And of course, faculty members say, well, how do I have time to do that? Well, what Concord does is it supplies you with instructors, so that when you have an essay, they're first read by the instructors who evaluate it, and then it's passed on to the faculty member, who then comments on, it can change the comments that the instructor made, and then it goes out to the student. I suggested once on the contracts listserv that perhaps we ought to do that, and if it's too expensive, we could outsource it to India. See, everybody laughed, but I was serious. That would be a very cheap way to have the evaluations initially done. It really wouldn't cost very much. But frequent evaluation is really something we need to do, and we have to think about other ways to do it. Another way Concord does it is to have quizzes. So every few weeks there'll be a multiple choice quiz that the students take in the module, and of course those don't need any human assessor. The student just gets the score back. And that's another one that I've incorporated into my class now at my stand-up classes, that for each topic I'll generate just 3 or 4 multiple choice questions, and then post them on the web courses or Twin, and then the students can do that at the end of each section and get just a quick check on, am I getting the high points. And again, it's not very hard for faculty to do that if you force yourself after your class to sit down and say, well, what did I want the student to get out of that class, and write a multiple choice question based on that. Then you generate a bank of these questions, and you can then post them for these evaluations. And then the students are not only taking these quizzes, but as I say, they're writing essays and exercises that are evaluated as well. And so that's a real important one to get into the class, and to try to think about, well, how can I do this with the least use of my own time? And that's, of course, the key to doing it. And that ties in with number 3, track student progress. That at Concord, let's say the students, of course, are taking these courses on their own time, but we all know, and sometimes law students do the same thing, they'll put off all the reading until 2 weeks before the exam. And this, of course, is very bad pedagogically, but how can you prevent them from doing it? Well, at Concord, if a student doesn't take that quiz witin a couple of weeks, then an email will go out to a counselor who will be told this student isn't taking the quizzes, and that counselor will then get in touch with the student and say, what's going on? Are you having any problems? Can we help you to get your work done in a timely way, so that you know students are tracking and are not putting everything off till the last minute. Well, you can do the same thing in your stand-up class, again with Lexis or Twin, when they take these. If you have developed some quizzes, you can see, well, have they taken the quiz? And you can generate a list of here's the students who've taken it, here's the ones that haven't. So you can get in touch with them and say, you know, I notice you're not keeping up with the class, and make some suggestions that they do so. So there are ways you can do that in the regular classroom as well, to make sure that they're not putting it all off to the end. Number 4, encourage students. That this is kind of unbelievable, but if you think about it, if I believe that a student could go through 3 years of law school and never be told, you're doing a good job, right? 3 years. Can you imagine if in your own professional work, if you didn't have somebody occasionally giving you that kind of reward and saying, you're doing a good job, keep it up? Yet we don't do that with students. But Concord makes sure that you do encourage the students, that when they write these essays, that there is some encouragement, keep up the hard work, and that you're rewarding them for their persistence. It's very hard to do I think if you've ever had like night students in your course in your college, it's very hard for them to give the priority that they need to their law school work, and they certainly need this encouragement. So I've tried to do that in the regular course. I've just tried to think of, well, when can I build in an opportunity to say to the students, thanks for your hard work, keep it up, you're doing great. And this then ties in with number 5, evaluation of the faculty, that most of us are evaluated simply by students reporting on what goes on in the classroom. But of course, we're doing a lot more than what we're doing in the classroom. And I have to admit, I was a little bit shocked the first time I got an evaluation from Concord, because they said, well, in your emails to the students, you're saying such and such. And my initial reaction was, whoa, you're reading my emails? And I kind of wish I had, I mean, again, these are only my Concord emails to the Concord students. I kind of wish I had been told that this would happen. But after I got over that initial shock, I realized, you know, this is a good thing, because I do need that advice on how should I be addressing the students. In other words, how can I word things in a more positive way, so that, because sometimes you get these emails and your initial reaction is, you're an idiot, didn't you read the instructions? You know, and you need to translate that into something more positive, and the Concord evaluation helped me make that translation, just sort of drop hints of, well, here's how you might word things. So, and the same thing, that they then are able to look at the comments that I made on student writing, and again, make some suggestions on here's how you might do that in a more positive way. And then similarly, they can listen to my the lectures that I have, because those are recorded and archived for the students, and so that can be commented on as well. So there's a much broader evaluation than that I get in my stand-up class. And there's no reason this can't be done in law schools as well. It's kind of shocking that we don't sit in on each other's classes and we don't comment on each other's work. But it seems to me it wouldn't be that hard to develop a group of faculty who would agree, well, I'll sit in on your class from time to time and make comments, and hopefully they would also have learned how to make those comments in a constructive way. So these are all things that I've learned from my online experience, and I'm every day trying to do more and more in my traditional work. Thanks.
He's using my computer.
Yeah, my
You
computer
would
is
have to
not,
remember me.
technology-wise, my computer doesn't like to cooperate with other systems. It's special.
Teaching contracts together in the spring.
It's terrible they can't remember the password for this. It's because they have a special password that you must. Do you have your list? Can I share it with you? Do you know how to log list?
Yeah, can I get you yours to that?
Yeah, and I'm going to share it with you really quick. I think I have a way around it. Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you. Because I can log it, but I can't put it up there.
Here we go.
So give me just a minute, I'm
Oh, I know,
going to send it to you.
See, I told you, you gotta talk slow for us. Wasn't kidding. There we go. Permanent.
Have you updated it to the one past Lucille?
No, I haven't.
And you could either have to do it, if you want, you can add me if you like. I know my numbers as well. Add me as a co-teacher and you can do it from there if you want.
Yeah, you want?
Yeah, can I just make you a co-teacher in this class? That way you can.
Try about this over.
Here, if you get to add them, I know my numbers so I can use it
I don't
That's not that.
Like a 4,000.
I do that?
When I was doing 16,000. Get rid of all of
This is where you get your popcorn and your candy.
You're so far better at knowing your numbers.
Well, I use my numbers as well.
No reason. It's all done electronically. Being pretty easy to get on every day. You know, yeah, I regularly compare the velocity, the amount of video as we come out and teach. Yeah.
It's sort of the arch.
Okay, I'm in it now, so if you go to turn, you should be able to pull it up.
Where's twin?
You have to go back to welcome to Westlawn tab. Right top, right there. Right above that. Says welcome to Westlawn. So you have to get that. Yeah, if you go to the Lost tab, right there. Above that. We're supposed to be a link to twin there.
Scroll down.
Yeah, okay. Scroll down and to the left.
There it is, okay.
There you go. Is it there? It should be there.
There it is. All right. Now that we're technology challenged, I'm Jennifer Martin, and I have explored, I call it, various technology-based ways in which to teach in the classroom. I have not done full distance education, so I'm one of those people somewhere in the middle in terms of experience. I've done podcasting. When I was at University of Louisville visiting for a year, we had a hurricane that winds that shut that university down for like 10 days. And so I did recording of classes and posted them online for students to access, with the video and screen captures and everything. Fairly, I guess, high-tech, different ways of using technology. But then this past year, I was visiting out at University of Oregon, and I would call it a somewhat technology-challenged environment, in that they have existing technology in the building, but if you want to use it, you actually have to call and set up technology beforehand. They have to meet you. You have to bring your own laptop. You have to power it up new. And so there's no reflecting the night before, I have this really great video clip that I'd like to show tomorrow, and kind of doing it on the fly. It requires a lot more of advanced planning. And so a lot of faculty out there don't do as much technology, and I found with my problem-challenged laptop that seems to be quirky, that I couldn't depend on always having my technology available, so I had to change things up by necessity. Now, of course, I think like Scott was mentioning, I also like to change things up, and every once in a while, try different things to integrate new techniques into my teaching. So I did two things that I'm going to talk about with you guys today. One of them exceedingly low-tech, because basically I feel like I've reverse engineered CALI in order to put it forward in I guess what I call my technology challenged environment. And basically for my business associations class, what I did, when I did it for Argue My Partner, Is This a Partnership? In a normal class, and again, a way to use technology in class, I might actually say, hey, we're talking about partnership law today, and there's this great CALI lesson on partnership law, and I would have a couple of the questions that I think are awfully clever, and I'd put them up on the screen, and we would, at the appropriate time, we would, have this hurrah moment in class, and we would have a discussion of whatever the question is. Now, of course, the impediment, of course, in doing anything like this is one I think that Lucille mentioned. You don't get everybody involved. It's not a true interactivity. If I call on Scott, he has to answer the question because he might volunteer to answer the question, but you don't have that same level of engagement. So certainly there's always impediments even when you have the real technology going. One of the clever things that I found for my technology challenged environment is that CALI actually has these complete listings of the lessons. I suppose if you were working either in a technology challenged environment or with faculty who aren't very technology savvy, one of the nice things, and this is my reverse engineering of CALI, John Mayers would probably be, I don't know, shocked. Basically, I took a bunch of using this printout, I actually took a number of the questions here and I made a low-tech, good old-fashioned paper handout for the students at University of Oregon. And the way to get them to actually do it, which I always find is one of the impediments of, with technology or perhaps anything, is I made them do it in class as group workshopping. And so it's kind of, it's exactly going, it seems like it's almost going the opposite way of using technology. But sometimes when you're in a pinch and you've got, and either your technology isn't working or you're in a technology challenged environment, there's still ways to kind of back out of it and use the same tools that are now available electronically in other ways. So completely low tech on this one because it's actually reversing it out of the technology. But it is a nice thing that I don't know that everyone knows that the CALI lessons have, is that you could actually get these papers that have all the hypotheticals and material in them. I'll call it the far more technology smart thing that I did this year is West has rolled out and I went to their session this morning to see if they would talk about this because I find this is a little bit more clever. They have this thing in the Twin Classrooms. It's a wiki, and I suppose wikis a couple years ago I wouldn't have necessarily even known what a wiki is, but now I know what wikis are, and I think it's kind of interesting. And so I decided that the contract students at University of Oregon were going to do a wiki project this spring. And so what you see here is the contracts wiki. And the way I set this up, and I guess the benefit is it's technology, and it's something that they do away from school. This is part of the class assignment. Everyone had to do at least one wiki. But it's interactive in the whole wiki format. The expectation is that they would actually update each other's wikis. So if Mr. Salisbury did a wiki, Mr. Yu might come behind and make it better. And so we ended up with this wiki project, and there's strengths to the format, the way that they had this set up. This was technology-wise easy for me because West had the software that they had just rolled out. Now, of course, it's not available from anywhere because, as we know, we just had to log into West in order to access these. I set up the structure. And so my role in this primarily was to set up the structure for the students to create the wikis. And then what I would call my thing about technology with students is incentivizing them, making sure they do it at the appropriate amounts of time, appropriate times in the semester. And so I set these up depending upon what the topics were at the time. And then the students, everybody had to do one, and the way, I guess my stick to make sure that stick or more carrot. Everyone had to do one, but if they did them, everyone did one and they did them well, I said, well, you can print them off and bring them into the examination. So that was my, carrot to see if they could do this and if it was a worthwhile project. I think it's interesting. Because now there was a set of materials and it was collaborative because each of them were doing various parts of it, and I find that when they work as lawyers on independent little pieces, maybe the whole product is a little bit better. I found, interestingly enough, despite this technologically friendly group of students that we generally have now, is that they weren't actually as good as you might expect at writing these wikis. This is Mr. Salisbury here, and he's actually a really good student. And so here's his idea of contract interpretation. But something that's missing from this, I don't know, do any of you guys do wikis? Does anyone know what's missing from this? Links, yes. They didn't really do any links. it's almost like the students went low-tech on this, because the product does have a very easy ability to link to the other wikis that are here. And I mean, I created like, 80 different topics for them to work with and to choose from. And I found that the different formats were used by different students, but they didn't actually. And I wondered, well, why did they do this? Why did they not do the links? Was it just that they were being lazy, or they were, or they didn't think of it, or they're not comfortable? I don't know why they didn't do it. This year, I'm going to have the students at St. Thomas University do a wiki project, and I'll see if I can find a way to encourage them to do links. And maybe I just didn't remind them. Maybe I didn't think of it. But they actually went fairly, what I would call traditional outline type of format. But each student was responsible only for one, and that they could come back behind and update each other's. And that's kind of the interactive part that I thought was interesting about this project. And they did actually come back and update each other's. The other thing about this is I required everybody to do one. But I put far more than one for each student in the twin classroom. But what I found is that some students really liked doing the wikis. The student here, Mr. Spirey, is actually blind. And he did a lot of wikis, because everything that he does is electronically based. And I thought it was particularly interesting because he is heavily electronically dominated. So those students that we have that are more electronically dominated were more engaged with this product than others, I guess, who learn in different ways. But Mr. Spirey did probably a half dozen or so of these. And I actually want to see if he did any links on his. Yeah, and he actually did a little bit of, a couple of links to actually code provisions. But I found it was an interesting project. The students actually liked having it because it meant they were responsible for one core material, one smaller piece of the topics, yet they hopefully could trust that the compatriots were working on some of the others, and basically to create a product that the class made that they could all eventually use. Yeah.
Do you think that wikis, I always worry about the student who's not in a study group and isn't part of a collaborative outline group.
Yeah.
Does this offer a way to draw the lone wolf into?
That's what I was wondering, whether, because it almost seemed like it is almost like in some ways, a different format for a big class outline that they'd all have benefit for. The only thing I've wondered about is there's always gaming of the system. Maybe some good students like, well, I don't want to do my best work here because I don't want to share it with Lucille. And I don't know whether they were engaging in that type of gamesmanship because we want the lone wolf on the outside. I got the sense that they did a respectable job on this. And this is my first time out trying something like this, because this particular product was just rolled out like in January. I saw it at the AALS, and I'm like, I'm going to go try it.
One more
Yeah.
point. Implicit, your exam is closed book.
The exam is closed book, but I said I'd allow them to bring this in if they did a good job. But otherwise they would have had to. But even if that was my incentive to get them to do it. I think it always depends on, are there ways in which you can get students, part of the participation credit. Would they have done it anyway if I just said they had to do it? And said it's just a completion thing, you must do it. Would they do it, and would they do a good enough job? I don't know. If they feel there's enough benefit for them, then they'll do it. I haven't decided how I'm going to pitch it at St. Thomas, but I'm going to make them create one. This was only second semester because this is when this came up. But it's in a technology challenged environment. This is something the students did outside of the university, so I wasn't dependent, obviously, upon the in-class component. I did not bring these into the classroom. I probably could have if I would have had them done. They'd have to do them at a certain point in time to use in the classroom. This was more for what I would call review afterwards, almost as you're alluding to, helping along an outline type of format for the students.
And one other point about the importance of interim evaluation of students and not just a 3-hour exam. Do you ever look at the wikis as they progress to see how students are understanding?
I was curious, so I would just check in from time to time. They did their biggest push. There were some gaps, toward the end, because you will always have some students who aren't, even in a tech-friendly generation, you're still going to have some students who it's just not necessarily their thing. And you're going to have those who are exceedingly tech-friendly. And so the ones who, there were students who did things very early on and they did them well. The thing I find about wikis, though, is it doesn't necessarily have to be the perfect product at square one. It could be just an okay product, and then the group improves it over time. Even though it was only, one per student, the way this reflects is that the last, whoever did the last edits. And some of these, there were clearly some students, here's another one from Mr. Salisbury, who was clearly somewhat technology driven. He's got another one down here. There's a few of these students who were much more technology driven, and so they were going back and making the product better because they felt
it's a kind of open source exercise. Yeah. Is the wiki the product of several students?
Well, it's the product of everybody. Everyone had to do one. The way I set it up, I said I had a class of 60.
When you say one, they did it individually.
They must do one of these. I made like 80 topics, and I said everyone in the class must create one wiki.
So you don't have students collaborating on the same wiki, if I'm understanding.
They couldn't. Someone had to be a primary author.
Right.
And you can do it however you wanted to, but what I said is each student must be a primary originator of one wiki.
So that way you can assess an individual.
Yes, so I would know that Mr. Zhu here had made a substantial contribution to the wiki project. Everyone had to make their contribution. I liked it. In terms of not having something that I had to do in the classroom because I was challenged in that component, something they could do elsewhere. It is a software. While you have to log into Twin to use it, it was relatively easy for the students, to use, and it did get them interacting somewhat with each other because I suppose if this is what you were going to bring into the examination, maybe we had a little bit of a vested interest.
Did you have time to look at their writing?
I didn't read them all. I have not read. What I did is every couple of weeks I would get online and see what wikis were out there and who was doing them. And sometimes, because I do little review components at different points in the semester, and I'd say, oh well, Mr. Kugler did this, did a wiki on this, and I'd say what some of the things that he mentioned in it, and to kind of go about it that way. They were not graded per se. I tend to be one during the semester, when Scott was talking about evaluation, when I do a lot of these things, I make them completion requirements, not necessarily exam type of score grading. And even when I do voluntary essays, I make them voluntary and I might give them a grade, but it's really just for them to do, as opposed to being a component of their grade. But that's just how I set it up. There's so many different ways you could do something like this. But I think the wiki, while not being fully, interactive, it is somewhere in the middle, and there's software out there that's relatively easy. My part of it was really setting the structure up. I did set up some original links for some of the code provisions, and then went back and kind of monitored it as the semester went on. But so, in a cost evaluative or technology challenged environment, this is something that would you'd certainly be able to do pretty much anywhere. So, anyway, thank you.
We have a few minutes left, but if there's questions, comments, or people want to share ways in which they were able to get faculty to use distance ed techniques, that would be great. Way in the back.
My question is to any of you. Had you noticed that students are learning more, better? Do you think they are the same or worse than the traditional teaching? also teach. Does that make sense as your new method, your interactive methods? Do you think people are getting it? Is it better for?
I think sometimes because we're pressed to cover a lot of material, I found that in the discussion board postings, I would put something out based on what we had talked about in the class and let the students go back and forth on it. And I felt in a way that they were able to analyze the topic in greater depth than we'd have time for in class. So I think there was some additional learning in that sort of area. At least that's what I found. I don't know if Jennifer, Scott has.
You know, my thought is that there are a lot of different learning styles and ways in which people learn, and with a technology savvy generation, since a lot of them are prepped to learn in this type of format, I think it does help them. And then, you know, just in terms of reviewing material, yeah, we learned all this material in classroom. You know, I have PowerPoints for all the UCC stuff, and yes, we read the code and work problems and the like. But this forced them to go out and have another opportunity, another bite at the apple. And so I think anytime that they have an opportunity, you can somehow find a way, a hook, to get them to go over material yet again, I think it's got to help.
Keep in mind some of your tools outside of your traditional Twin and other traditional course management systems. We talked about social media with our faculty in the spring of last year, and when I was maternity leave, one of the faculty members said, you know what I want to try to do? I want to try to use Twitter to have class conversations, and this was set up, and they did it. So there are, all kinds of ways to sort of add tools that maybe your students are familiar with in other contexts, not that a lot of people Twitter, to this kind of course management system to sort of give people incentives to think in different ways about it.
Questions, comments?
Well, you talked about what we might be doing. We're at MCCU, we just tested a hybrid course this summer, a writing course, which was synchronous and asynchronous. The asynchronous part was done through Capture, and we posted it. And the synchronous part was done from a new room that we built out that allowed for us to have up to 32 simultaneous students in a conferencing mode. We're curious to see how this goes forward. We're just beginning to do the evaluations from the student end to see how the experience was for them. But from the faculty end, it was hard to get faculty to actually volunteer for this. But now that we've actually done a class, now we're getting a lot of faculty to jump on board. The concern I have is that it seems like there are certain courses that lend itself for synchronous learning and some courses that lend itself for asynchronous learning. And creating some, it seems like as we go forward now with this model that we should start looking at what courses lend itself for more synchronous learning and some are lending itself for asynchronous and post that somewhere for the community to I guess, review.
Yeah, and I think the ABA is part of the standards for the use of distance ed. If it's a distance ed course, that actually has to go through your curriculum committee as a distance ed course. So if you've already had contracts, say, approved when it was in a traditional face-to-face classroom, if you decide to go distance ed, you actually have to go through the curriculum committee again. So each school can then have a chance to evaluate whether it is appropriate for use with distance ed. But I think some of it is that you're going to get feedback from the students, and I think some of the reluctance of faculty, besides on the technology, is that people are worried that is this going to hurt my evaluations, and I don't want to be the first one to be out there doing it. And I think that's something that has to be balanced out by whoever's doing the evaluation process, that if you take the risk, there should be some recognition that you did take a risk by doing something out of the ordinary. And I think that would encourage more people. Because I've had faculty say to me, oh, I did the distance ed and it was really tough, and I feel like I put my neck out there, and what do I get for it? What if it goes sour? I'm the one that it falls on. So I think part of it is also thinking in your schools about how you're going to balance out that fear of how that impacts faculty members' evaluation by students. Questions or comments, others? Well, thank you so much, folks. I really appreciate your time.
So I'll try to get an email address for him.
How do you know Dan?
What's that?
How do you know Dan Morrison?
He was visiting in Seattle when I was in Seattle. His office was a couple down from my office.
I have a profession for my this summer for teaching courses. I probably will see
So that's the iPad. Well, I also don't have a reader yet. I just have my laptop. I'm getting a new laptop. And I would like a reader. So like this one. I didn't know about the iPad. I want to try but even the reader part of it is useful for me. It's nice though, I like it. That's right. Driving is always out there. Food too. Hey, thank you, man. Thank you for coming. And Colin, thank you for this. I don't use it myself. I use Lexus. You know, it's my I don't use Lexus. I use Lexus. So what I wanted to do was to now meet those learning. Oh, I see. So when you have it done, I think I might have done it though. I actually see it came up.